this is a view of the top of the first piston, and you can see my marble is staying centered in this piston. And that's important because if the marble was just allowed to roll back and forth on this piston as it was climbing the steps, it would be likely to fall off either side. So what I've had to do is use the scroll saw and a rasp to cut a compound cut into these pistons. And I'll show you on this one as best I can. And if you can see, there's actually a channel cut in the top of this piston. So as the marble rolls into this side, it wants to be centered and channeled down to the very center of the piston to wait to move up to the next piston. So that's very important, and I'll take you over to the scroll saw and show you how I cut that in a few minutes. While we're here, I want to show you this piece right here. When a marble comes down the ramp and hits this turnaround, okay, and it comes out, it has to be channeled back to the pistons. So what I did there is, after I had the top section cut out for the pistons, I took my rasp, my wood rasp, and I actually used it at an angle to give myself a ramp down to that first piston. So when you build this top piece and you cut it out, it won't be in the plans that you need this ramp here, but you do, or the marble will just get up here and stop. So once you get this top piece cut out, make sure you use a rasp or some sandpaper, or you could even carve it out, however you need to do it, to get this little ramp right here to lead yourself up to the first piston. Okay, and you can see the pistons are all designed to just slide in and out, just like that. And I'll get a little closer here of the motion, and you can see every other one, while it's going down, the other one to its right or to its left is going up. So that's the motion. And there I think you can see pretty well how the marble is channeled to the middle of each piston as it moves up the ramp. And then of course you saw it, that it hit the top of the ramp and was rechanneled back down to the bottom piston, and then again back up. So that's the motion. Now, let me back the camera up here just a little bit, and I'll show you the next challenge for this piece. This back ramp, the slide that takes the marble from the top back down to the turnaround, I used the bullnose router bit, and I actually routed, actually it was a 3/8 inch router bit, I think I said 1/4 inch, and I actually routed this channel down the center of this slide right here, so that as the marble came to the top, it would be delivered to that channel and then back around. The easiest way I found to do that was with a router table. If you don't have a router table, you could take some sandpaper and wrap it around probably a 1/2 inch or maybe a 3/4 inch dowel, and it would take some time, but you could sand that channel into there, and that worked okay, or should work okay. The very last piece, the very last piston I told you was cut on an angle, and you can see that here. And I also put a channel in the top of this to channel the marble back down to the slide. And to do that, to put that channel in there, I used a spindle sander because I didn't want to run this small piece through the router. I thought it would be too dangerous. So you can see I was able to sand this channel in here, so I know it can be done. Okay, let's see. When we talk about the crank is just very simple. It's one of the cams cut out with a hole drilled in the center that accepts the center axle, and I just took another piece of dowel and drilled a hole and put that in that cam to give us a crank to use here. On the other end, this cam is drilled in the center, and obviously it's just to hold this end in place so the shaft doesn't come out. The cams in the middle will all be drilled off center, and you'll be able to find that in the plans. So just cut the cams out to size in the plans, and then use your drill to cut the holes where they are. When you're gluing these cams to this shaft, obviously you have to push the shaft through one end and then insert the cams on it, and you want to line them up so each cam is lined up with the center of the piston above it. So get your pistons all cut out, have them ready to slide down in here, and kind of hold them with one hand while you install the cams. Once you get the cams installed, then you can go ahead and slide the shaft on through to the other side and put your retainer on that end. Then after that, it was just a simple matter of building a base to put it on. I left a little extension on this side because you need something to hold on to while you're actually moving the crank. That just gives you a little bit of a handhold. It also is a place, and I haven't done it yet, will give me a place to build a small container for the marbles. Just a couple more tips here. Obviously you want to, as you're cutting these pieces out, you need to watch very carefully about the size of these pieces, because you need to have the marble able to roll into that. So you have to make this piston the correct size to where when it's at its lowest point, it's below this ramp. And likewise, when the marble's on that piston and this piston's at its top point, it has to be higher than the piston beside it. So as you're making these compound cuts, you have to be very careful to make sure all these things line up right. And the way I did that was, while these were all still flat, I would have this one at its highest point, and this, of course, would be at its lowest point, and I'd take a pencil and draw a line across the side of this first piston, and I knew that would be the lowest point at which I could use my compound cut. And with that, I'm going to take you over to the scroll saw and show you how to make this compound cut on these pistons. Okay, this is probably by far the most complicated cut in the project. Now, I tried a couple different ways of making this compound cut at the top of the piston to make this ramp we talked about to direct the marble where we want it. And using a sander to sand a channel in the top of it really didn't work very well. I couldn't get the exact profile I wanted. I also had a terrible time of burning the end grain of this oak, and it was becoming next to impossible to sand it out. It also just didn't look good. I couldn't ever get it the way I wanted it to look. So you can try that approach, and if it works for you, great, but I'll show you how I ended up doing it. Like I was showing you on the piece a minute ago, I took the first piston and then I did the same technique through the first 4 pistons. And I would get the first piston at its highest stroke, and I would take and draw a line to the piston to its left, how high it was. So I knew this line was as low as I could possibly go on my channel. If I went down below this line, then the marble was going to hit the piston to its left and not move on to it. So I've got this line set, okay? The next thing I had to do to get this channel cut in here and had it directed is I needed to have a compound angle. Now to do that, basically the angle I needed was to take this line, okay, where it intersected this edge of the piston, and draw an angle from that line down to this corner. So basically I would have an angle of about that right there. If you can see that, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. So if you can see that pencil line from that line there down to the corner of this piston, that's the angle that I needed to channel this piece down into. Okay, so that is the angle that I'm going to set the table. I'm going to tilt the table and I'm going to set it to that angle right there, and I'll just use this piece to set the angle up, and I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, the next thing I needed to do was find the center point of this line. And I know this seems complicated, but once you do the first one, it's not too bad. So I knew my pistons were 2 inches wide, so I marked a mark right here at the 1 inch mark. At that point, I needed to draw lines from that mark up to that corner and from the mark up to the other corner. So now I've got all the cutout lines for the compound cut that I want to make. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out this piece right here, this little triangle, and I'm going to do it at an angle so that it's cut up like this and in like that. Okay, now I'm going to move the camera and I'll show you what I'm going to do next.